Christian Schmidt, Klaus Naumann, welcome to AICGS. Thank you very much for being with us today. Today is a special day. It's the day in which the last American, help me out here, Klaus, tank left Germany, right? It was pulled out today. Some people think that's a very big symbol of American presence declining in Germany or declining in Europe altogether. How do you see, as someone who was so intricately involved in all of that for so many decades, how do you see the symbolism of that?
Well, of course it is to some extent a sad day, since the American presence in Germany and in Europe was part of the glue which kept our two nations together. We had millions of Americans, including the family members, who stayed for a couple of years in Germany and in other European places. And they began to understand what Europe is all about. The diversity of this tiny place compared to the melting pot United States of America. And they developed a relationship and a friendship which helped us to overcome the biggest confrontation we have ever seen in peacetime in Europe. We have not forgotten this. We remember it with gratitude. We honor the sacrifices of many American families, which they also made during the days of the Cold War. We have achieved together the biggest success in our common history. We defeated a system of world power without firing a shot. And that remembrance is connected to the withdrawal of the last Abrams.
Right, but now we, of course, move on. We have a new mandate, we have a new mission, we even have a new way of thinking about why we're together. And Christian, when you think about that, do you think that we are in need of new glue for this relationship? And if so, how would you define it?
Yes, I think we are also at the end of the mission, the intense mission since these times in Afghanistan, which NATO, the transatlantic alliance, had to keep for 10, 11 years now. In the next 2 years this will be off. We will have a new mission, which is just a training advisory mission. And we have to think and rethink what are the binding ties between our nations, the transatlantic. And I assume this is not only to reinvent security policy, but to put in a framework of global policy understanding, be it in economic, environmental, and social issues. So research, this is where we should come to in a transatlantic relation. If not, I would see some challenges and some dangers for the future cooperation.
Those dangers being that we would drift apart?
Yes.
Why would we drift apart?
Because the basic interests are not similar. In some areas, we Europeans have to see more that they have to define their interests not via the transatlantic relation as it is, but from their own side, and to combine it with Americans. So let me refer to the migration issue. This is seen in quite another area in North Africa, gives some pressure to Europe, not to the US, and some instability which affects very early. Europe does not affect the US. So we have to think of having a smart understanding of this security organization.
Now, one could say, yeah, that sounds very much like you have to get your own European house in order, so to speak, politically and maybe even to some extent militarily. That's a very difficult challenge, it seems to me. In other words, how do you find yourself intra-Europe connecting to each other so you can speak to the United States in a way that actually we have been talking about for a long time, but never really knew whether it was going to happen.
We luckily we can go back to these times when NATO was developed and based. We had the discussion of the European pillar in NATO.
Exactly.
And we have to construct this European pillar not only as part of the bridge, but of the foundation of a structural Europe which is able to settle its the conflict in the region with own means. And this will, in times of shrinking capabilities, just being able, if we reorganize our political cooperation and understanding, that there is this understanding of sharing and pooling is not only a new label, but is a need to organize, and this needs political will.
Yeah, I mean, we would look at it from this perspective and say, yes, but even trying to come to grips with your common currency, you're having difficulty with that. How do you expect to go beyond that to get the sovereignty to have one general in charge of a European army or a unit? I mean, how do you challenge the sovereignty borders and barriers that still are in the way of your own common currency at the moment?
We're talking about the two core issues of the understanding of sovereignty and of self-governing. This is the economy, the financial markets, and this is security.
Right.
So we have just arrived at the crucial points and issues after all these nice times where we try to just to put together our regulations for whatever in the economy. So now we have to overcome the financial crisis in our understanding, in German understanding. This can only be without the understanding of deficit spending. So we have to go to austerity, but to reorganize the rules. Mm-hmm. And we, unfortunately, we cannot wait up to having finished this issue with starting the new one,
Right.
the other one. So the political work which has to be done, the statesmanship, should I
Right.
say, is to do the one and not missing the other.
Right.
Let me say diplomatically, I see that we're just on the start
Okay.
of this approach.
We'll give you that one. But General Naumann, when you think about the fact that part of this atmosphere around this question has been shaped a little bit by the fact that Germany's been, for example, in Afghanistan with us since really 2001. What do you think the result of that experience has done to the psyche in Germany of the readiness to do what has been done? Germany was one of the more important allies we had, number 3 there in all those years. What's the resonance of that now in the German public about that particular decade of Afghanistan?
Well, I think Germany came a very long way. And during these 10 years of Afghanistan deployment, the German armed forces learned to fight shoulder to shoulder with their allies. They have proven once again that they are reliable and capable allies. And I think this message is also sinking in with the German people. Of course, as in the United States, a war is never popular if it's not clearly and directly linked to a clearly defined national interest. That is not the case in Afghanistan. And for that reason, one should not be misled by polls which suggest that a majority of German people are against an Afghanistan deployment. But regardless of that, they respect what the German armed forces have done. They also know that this is an important element of NATO's cohesion and NATO's preparedness to shoulder commonly burdens in order to meet future challenges. So all in all, I think Afghanistan has been a useful experience which strengthened the German preparedness to be a reliable ally on the side of our American partners.
That will not, however, change the state minister's problem of going into the Bundestag and trying to get as much as he can for the defense budget. You're still going to have some struggles there, are you not? Just like we are here with the sequester. As much as Klaus Naumann might be correct about the pride of the Bundeswehr, in the Bundeswehr, it's probably going to be difficult, is it not, to continue to extract support for defense?
If you don't tell it to anybody else, we have managed that we have had nearly no nominal and really no reduction in our budget, but I do not see an increase. That's right. Compared to other European countries, we are living reasonably well, not on a high level, but reasonably well. But this describes just only the problem that we will not have the possibility to invest more money in these times. We have to make better value of this money we're investing. And this is a key issue in Europe, where we are far away of having solved all and made the best out of it. So this is an issue of cooperation, of jointness, and of the political will to act in this context.
Klaus?
In that respect, I would strongly support what Christian Schmidt just said. I think that's the only way forward to achieve a bigger bang for the buck. If we unite our efforts, if we look for sharing and pooling options, if we also look for more, what I call in my old NATO parlance, NATO component forces, such as we have with the AICGS and the future AICGS component, we can do with the same amount of money more if we succeed in eliminating the overlaps which exist due to national constraints. But we have to be clear about one issue, and that was also mentioned by the State Secretary. It means at the end of the day the transfer of some small elements of national sovereignty to an international body, be it NATO or be it the European Union.
Now, just to stay on that European Union side, do you think the infrastructure that's currently in place can help that transformation occur to under a European roof, or does something new have to be created? Do you have enough there to think in terms of creating a European force, or does something new have to happen, Christian?
Yes and no. There are shortfalls in several areas of capabilities which we have to work on. We have some areas where we could, by combining or putting them together and have joint developments to give an answer. In this moment, I wouldn't say that we are 100% organized, and there is a need really to do more and to think how far we can reorganize also our way of procurement activities.
Now, of course, that brings up an interesting question about procurement, and that's been a barrier in transatlantic affairs sometimes because of the fact that there's been a block on German investment here or some government issues. Let me end this discussion with a question about something that's now in gear, and that's the so-called Transatlantic Trade and Innovation Initiative, TTIP. A lot of people talk about that as the new way to engage and to some extent inject energy into the transatlantic relationship beyond NATO or parallel to NATO. How do you see this?
I would say parallel to NATO, and as NATO has been founded as a political organization, if we take it very strictly, nothing has to be reinvented. Just edit or interpret what NATO is. I remember that we had a NATO summit 8-9 years ago, where we just learned that there is. We have concentrated this just only on the security issues and have forgotten the alliance of values and political alliance. Now there we are back, and it's on us just not to make with the institutions of NATO. They are not prepared to organize economic coordination, but in the basic sense of NATO to do this. So I would say an extension of North Atlantic cooperation.
So you don't think we're going to have to reinvent something, we're just going to have to strengthen something that already exists and hope that that will become something with which the public can identify. I think one of the things that a lot of people talk about on both sides of the ocean is that in the last decade, we've had a lot of struggles, Afghanistan, in our case, Iraq, and a few other things. And there are a lot of people who say that the United States is war-weary. We are, however, now looking to Europe to say, what can you do? Or how can we burden share? Or how can we find new ways to help each other do things that maybe the United States felt 10 years ago, we'll do this by ourselves. This is the way we reacted to Iraq. It seems to me that this is an opportunity as well for the U.S. to look to Europe and say, not only you can do more, but we need you to do more. Are you comfortable with that expectation?
Well, I think one should start by saying this TCAP is something which will enshrine and encompass the mutual investments which exist on both sides of the Atlantic, which also are part of the glue which keep us together. It will also express common convictions and values, such as the rule of law and democracy, which are, I think, important elements. And then I would say that the Europeans have already done something which also matters for the United States of America. Think of the democratization of the former Warsaw Pact, which was primarily a European achievement, which produces stability on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. And you, as a maritime global power, you need stability on both opposing coastlines. So the good old Admiral Mahan is still true.
Right.
And that is the value of the Europeans to the United States of America. And I go as far as to say, without a stable Europe, it will be very difficult for the United States to achieve the rebalancing in a successful way and to maintain its position as the global power number one.
You know, it's interesting, and I'll close on this. On July 4th, 1962, President Kennedy gave a speech in Philadelphia where he called on not the day of independence, but he called it the day of interdependence. And he went on to talk about Europe. And he said, you are where we were 150 years ago. We need you to go further. That was in 1962. I think the expectation is still valid.
I would draw out of this speech of President Kennedy today, when we're starting this extension of transatlantic relations, you cannot hand this over just to the technocrats.
Right.
This is not only an issue of all respect of the European Commission. There must be a commitment of the key member states of European Union on political level to bring this ahead. And there's lies a lot of responsibility also to Germany, not only. I would include especially the United Kingdom, France, Poland, Spain and Italy. But we have to do and understand this as a political project, and not just as a kind of technical organization of cooperation.
Right. I think that's what President Kennedy meant back in 1962. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us at AICGS.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.